I'm here to talk about, I guess I have the talk that has the longest title of the show. They limited me to under 50 words, so I got it there. But there's a lot of things that are packed into that title. And so hopefully, during my talk today, I will give you a sort of maybe a different perspective on how Industry 4.0 and enterprise augmented reality applies to manufacturers of all sizes. And so when we think about sort of the adoption of technology, one of the things that is frequently overlooked is that frequently new technology is only adopted by large enterprises to start with. And we see that as being part of the, well, I guess I have a clicker up here. Part of the loss of a promise when you come out with a brand new technology that offers pretty significant benefits. You really don't want to limit it to just the top 4,000 manufacturing companies in the United States. You want to include as many of the small to mid-sized manufacturers, which make up about 80,000 companies in the US as you can. So just a little background on Augmentir. The people on the right is the founding team. It's myself, John Canosa, who's here in our booth, Phil Huber and Lawrence Fan. And we've got a pretty deep history in manufacturing and in all of the industry X.0s that have come out. Phil was one of the two founders of a company called Wonderware, which really led the introduction of software into factories. And so back in the 80s, he and his co-founder, Dennis Morin, came out with the first Windows-based software product that allowed humans to run machines. And it really led the introduction of non-embedded software into factories. And so real successful, went public in '94. I met Phil back then when he had a 13-person company. 10 years after that happened, myself and a guy named Rick Bellata, who's pretty well known in manufacturing circles, founded a company called Lighthammer Software. And you can think of that as really Industry 3.0. We recognize that there's all this software in the factory, that were disparate systems. And so we built a product that provided a unification layer, which was categorized as enterprise manufacturing intelligence, so unified visibility for decision support. We then added the first standardized way of integrating factory information to the enterprise, and were acquired by SAP. So if you are a manufacturer who uses SAP, there's probably an 80% chance you have that software in your infrastructure. It's SAP MII. So Rick and I, about 10 years after founding Lighthammer, founded a company called ThingWorx, which was in the industrial Internet of Things platform space. We were about 5 years after the IoT market started. We came in at an entry point where we thought there was an interesting value opportunity in the space that others had kind of missed. Started the business about a year and a half in, we acquired two small companies. John Canosa had a company in Rochester, New York, that we acquired, and Phil and Lawrence had a company in Southern California. So they really became part of the original founding team of ThingWorx, and we became pretty successful, sold it to PTC in 2014, and I ran that business at PTC until about 2016. And then we went on to do our own things. Today, ThingWorx is recognized by Gartner as the leader in the industrial Internet of Things platform category, and really synonymous with Industry 4.0. I know General Electric uses it as part of their brilliant factory strategy. So pretty deep into that. So we'd spent about 30 years helping humans run machines better. And when we came together to talk about this idea of helping frontline workers, sort of a class of workers who have been underserved by technology, we thought we had a pretty good idea. And I think some people are starting to call it Industry 5.0 when we're making machines work, humans work better alongside machines. And so that's kind of the entry point we came into the market. We looked around, and there are clearly people already doing some of the things we do. And we said, well, what was the context of helping frontline workers in manufacturing? And it's how do they do their job? How do they learn to do it? How do they get assistance? And so clearly tribal knowledge is a big part of how they learn their job. Classroom training is a big part. It used to be everyone got their instructions on some piece of paper until people started to realize that paper can be, out of date. It's hard to communicate information. So a group of companies came out in what would be called the electronic work instruction space. And that's kind of the way the market was until about maybe 2010, 2012, 2014. And then you had sort of this event, or these series of events where smart glasses were being introduced into the market, and there was a real sort of move towards seeing if we could use augmented or mixed reality to help guide service and manufacturing workers. And so a number of companies said, hey, well, this is perfect. If I can deliver instructions through a wearable, the person can work hands-free. Now I can have a continuously connected frontline workforce. And so a number of companies went into the space with the two premises that instructions to a wearable and maybe augmented or mixed reality to help someone do their job was going to be sort of the ticket to sort of nirvana. And so, a lot of these companies started in 2010, 12, 14. But if you look at the market today, the enterprise augmented reality market, I mean, it's squarely stuck in the early adopter phase. If you ever noticed Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm curve. And when you look at it, I go to these events all the time, and in every event, I sit on a panel, and the purpose of the discussion of the panel is, how do we increase the speed of adoption in the space? How do we get out of pilot purgatory? And if you're a small manufacturer, you're not even you're not even experimenting with this stuff unless you're a real early innovator. So the question is, what's preventing us from crossing the chasm? And I have some ideas on it. Obviously, that's why I'm up here to talk. But sort of as a cautionary note, the Internet of Things market was started in 2005 approximately. There's a bad echo there. Has just barely crossed the chasm. Gartner came out with a report last summer, I think it was, a year ago, and they ranked all the Internet of Things platforms, and they ranked ThingWorx, one of my babies, in the top right corner. But the problem was they were all in the lower left quadrant, right? So there was no magic quadrant. And the reason is because it just has not reached that level where everyone's adopting it. And again, if you're a small to mid-sized company, you're not adopting it almost at all, okay? So that's sort of a cautionary tale of, is enterprise AR going to follow in the path of the Internet of Things market? And if it does, we have about 10 more years before we find ourselves in the other side of the chasm. So I have a couple of thoughts on that. So why is that? So I think the first reason is that in the early entrants into space built products which at the time was in the classic model of a traditional enterprise software company. I did it at ThingWorx, I did it at Lighthammer, so I know of which I speak. The problem with that is you make this assumption about what people will accept in terms of deploying software. So you really don't complete development, to be honest with you, because there'll be an app engineer and a consultant on every pilot, right? And so you end up what everyone calls pilot purgatory. So these pilots are expensive, they're risky. A lot of the success is dependent upon the team that's taking care of it at the time. And for those same reasons, it's why small to mid-sized businesses can't participate. The other point that I recognize, and was one of the reasons that Augmentir was founded, because we thought the market looked pretty crowded, is that the original intent was to get instructions on wearables or to use AR or MR to help people learn to do a job better, to instruct them in line. But once that's done, what's the basis for continuous improvement? And so, you've got really sort of a capped ROI, and most of the original business cases that I've seen is talking about how so-and-so reduced the amount of time by 36%. But if you really look at it, it's primarily because they went from non-hands-free to hands-free, right? And so that's a one-time gain and really an important gain, but they don't get that gain, that 38% again next year. They don't get a new gain, right? So we saw that as really these two things as the reason why we would actually decide to start a business in the space. So we said, okay, everyone knows two of the three challenges or three of them. How do you take the tribal knowledge that's in your most experienced technicians and assemblers' heads and make it a scalable corporate asset? How do you take a varied workforce and have them perform at the right level of quality and safety but at the highest level of productivity possible for that worker. And then how do you use newfound connectivity to a workforce to build the basis of an operational excellence infrastructure? So how do I get year-over-year improvement? And so for us, because we were starting in 2017, I mean, it couldn't have been more obvious because every other company in the world was doing it who was founded about that time. How do I make my salespeople better? We use AI. So we said, it's first and foremost, helping frontline workers improve productivity over time is an artificial intelligence machine learning problem first. Everything else is sort of table stakes or secondary. And again, if you look around, I'm in the venture space all the time. Every company that's getting funded is AI to help your call center operator, AI to help your salespeople do better quotes, have better conversations. And it's because humans make very noisy signal generators, and AI is really good, and ML is really good at finding the actual data, in the noise. So our basic premise was to transform frontline workforces, not workers, but workforces, through a broader set of capabilities we call augmented operations. And it's basically two things: combining what's traditionally known as in the enterprise AR space, that functionality, with artificial intelligence to think about ongoing improvement. And the second thing, which is really, sort of a thing I tried at PTC and didn't succeed at on the ThingWorx platform, is to build a platform that was usable and consumable by companies of all sizes. So, when we built our product, we said, well, what's the poster child of enterprise software today? Is it, hopefully there's no SAP people in my former colleagues, is it like SAP or is it like Slack? And so clearly today, if you're going to build an enterprise software product, you're thinking Slack first, right? There's a big effort though, because what you do when you build a consumerized enterprise software product is you have to invest R&D to make the product easy enough to use so that everyone can use it. If you don't, you just say, hey, I've got some consultants, they'll fix that, on each project. So each project ends up paying that cost over and over again. So we took the approach, the Slack approach. Because of our background, clearly we serve the spectrum of manufacturing, production, energy, maintenance, and service. That's our sweet spot. And when we kind of think about it, we think, how do we help these new frontline workers, through a set of guided procedures which can deliver at any moment step-by-step instructions, rich media, mixed reality, animated CAD. We can deliver something we consider to be different, which is the last minute of training. So, one of the things we're seeing is that people are no longer trying to train specialists, they're trying to train generalists, and at the moment of need, they will turn them from a generalist to a specialist. And then obviously you can deliver remote expertise, and maybe in the future you can have a bot to be that remote expert. So you write those things, you deliver them to a worker, using whatever is the most appropriate interface technology, glasses, phones, tablets, et cetera. But then more importantly, so I've got this newfound connectivity, let's not underuse it, let's overuse it. So we think of the frontline workforce now as a new source of high granularity data, which is the basis for identifying opportunities and continuous improvement. So when we think of our platform, we think of augmented guided procedures, which is a way to help guide and upskill people, and then an integrated set of remote experts. A couple years ago, there were two separate types of companies. There were companies who made sort of remote assistant software, and there were companies who did sort of guided instructions. And then I think people realized that the remote expert is no longer a category, it's more of a feature of other products. So everyone's trying to merge and have both sets of those. But again, we built ours on AI with some very specific ideas. So the first thing we do is when we learn enough about the workers, we score every worker's proficiency in everything they do. So if they do 100 different service repairs or they build 100 different products, we have an internal model of how proficient they are on doing that job. And so what we can then do with that is we can then either recommend or provide to a newer worker, a less proficient worker, a set of instructions that are more helpful, that will take longer, but will ensure that they get the job done on quality. When whoops, I'm going to go back. I guess I can go back. The second thing we do is we take this massive data that's coming in and just, it's a simple company maybe building, 500 things a day, 500 lots a day with, 100 assemblers. You start getting thousands and thousands and thousands of job execution data. And we use AI to kind of paw through the data, recognize patterns, throw out outliers, and then to provide a stacked rank list of the areas where you have the biggest monthly opportunity. And so, we do that automatically, and that's really sort of the basis for a lean team or a Six Sigma team. That's the first place they look. And on the other side, on the remote expert, subject matter expert thing, we have some really cool stuff coming, so I'm not talking about here, but happy to talk individually about that. But all, using AI as the underpin. So I was looking at this slide deck, and I'm always late to these things, so the host is like, where are you? Where are you? You gotta get down here. And so I was looking at that, if you can read the word learner, I guess I need to learn my spelling. But so this is what learner proficient execution looks like. Based on the capability of the person, they would get assigned one or the other branches. In one real case we have, they service complex stuff. Before they put the thing back together, they create an escalation for their newer employees so that a supervisor has to sign off on it. So in terms of the, how we help identify opportunities, we have a thing called true opportunity. And really, that basically is, if you take all of the raw data and you get rid of all of the data that's not capturable or not really, it's not an outlier, you end up with an actual opportunity that we think is capturable. It's either against your target times or against a benchmark that we calculate that we think is the optimum time. And we stack rank them. And then in each one, you can go through and figure out in each step where are the opportunities. And for each opportunity, we say, here are the things we believe you need to do to capture those opportunities. So insight and recommendation. The case that's being shown up here, in this one step, it turns out that a small set of workers are responsible for most of the time overage, so we would recommend some training for those workers. So again, Augmentir Enterprise AR plus AI is the core of the product, but delivered in a modern enterprise software platform. Okay, so what people really want to hear is the use cases. So I brought 3 use cases, and I brought small, medium, and large because we're committed as a company to making this new technology, the new technology and its associated benefits available to companies of all sizes. For those of you who don't keep track of it, in the United States, depending on which government statistics you look at, there are approximately 84,000 manufacturing companies, of which 80,000 are small to mid-sized businesses. So dealing only in the large enterprise space eliminates more than half of the total output and 80,000 of the 84,000 companies. So when we think about where did we score, where did we help, in a use case we think of the 4 things. Is this an example of speed of adoption? Is this an example of making it easy to convert tribal knowledge? Is this an example of closing the skills gap in a meaningful way? And is this an example of providing an opportunity for continuous improvement for the company? So the first company, anyone who's from Texas might know of this company, Holt Cat. They're a Caterpillar dealer. They sell, repair, maintain, and refurbish Caterpillar and other heavy industrial equipment. They operate in about 118 counties in Texas. They don't have the whole state, but they're the nation's largest Caterpillar dealer. And they're clearly a large enterprise. They have, I think, approximately 1,000 technicians. So it's a really, really, unbeknownst to me, a really big business. Very forward-thinking. They have their own venture fund. So they're, give you an idea of the scale of them. So we got connect with them. They took a look at our product and they said, well, we think you can help us in a number of areas. And so they said, well, let's try it out in remanufacturing of turbos, right? So when you remanufacture a turbo, it comes in, you disassemble, you inspect. Some things need to be scrapped, some things needs to be refurbished, and then they get rebuilt and then shipped back to the customer. So it's a pretty complex process with a fair number of sort of logical loops in it. They signed up, they opened up an account on our site, and with the help of our customer success person, were up and running, had the whole turbo rebuild facility running on Augmentir in 3 days. 7 days later, they had what they considered to be useful operational data that they were using to make decisions. So it's pretty cool. There are 4 big things: easier work instructions to help their techs, feedback from techs they include in the process, and I'll show you that, improved efficiency in tracking, and insights in the process and the data. And one of the things that they have is they would really like to know how long it takes each person to do each job so they can accurately assign standard times. And currently they don't have that. It's, they'd like to reward people based on individual performance, but their data really is sort of washed out at sort of a store or site level. And you can see an example on the left side of sort of the instruction and then a detailed look if this is what a good part or bad part looks like. So this is the authoring environment. So again, they did all the authoring themselves. Again, the guys, Elliot picked it up, did all this looping, branching, all that stuff. And then the cool thing here is the head technician, and his name is grayed out for good reasons, because we're privacy. He was in the middle of the procedure and said, you have essentially, your picture isn't that good. So takes a picture locally, posts it up as part of the procedure. That shows back up in the insights panel for the author. And then the author can determine whether they want to include that, replace the content, add it to the content. So they really like the idea that they can bring their technicians, into the process so they can, be engaged with what they're doing. And then this is just a detailed example of the opportunities, and you can choose to have the outliers shown or not shown. And so you get really granular data, and you can use that again for determining different opportunities. So up and running in 3 days, technician feedback, accurate time tracking now possible. They're moving on to other areas within their company where they do similar type work. They're going to try using RealWare to see if hands-free will help them in these environments. And then they have a couple of business systems, some sort of older IBM-based systems that we'll be integrating to, and then Salesforce and some others. Okay, so then number 2, Biochem Fluidics, mid-sized company, part of the Halma group. They do high-precision pumps and valve solutions. They go into, medical machines, chemistry machines, et cetera. A real big lean company, lean from Halma on down. Some examples of their work centers up there. So they're high mix, mainly hand assembly and testing of these smaller objects. The original state was paper instructions. They had looked around for a while and they'd realized that most of the things were just converting paper to paper and glass, and they didn't see enough value in doing that. So their continuous improvement head built all the procedures himself and then expanded the group. 3 days to get the first one up and running. They currently have 89 active different things they build using Augmentir today. They use Sage as an ERP system, 2 days to integrate Sage and Augmentir. So they used to bring in, they have a lot of turnover. They used to bring in operators. It took them 3 months of training to get an operator proficient. They've reduced that by 80%. Newer technicians can perform almost at the same level as their more experienced ones. And again, they're big lean, so it's really good for the continuous improvement efforts. So kind of a home run here. Fast adoption. They convert a lot of their tribal knowledge into the instructions. They're able to, Connor's one of he's a continuous improvement engineer. So want to make data-driven decisions. That helps them. In the first couple months, the insights from the platform identified issues in current procedures and also identified new potential business opportunities. So, again, they're a lean company, and they think of this as a very invaluable tool in their lean efforts. And the last one is, small. So you go down from thousands of employees to hundreds to, say, 100-ish employees. So StrongArm is a maker of industrial workstations for factories, upstream oil and gas, and the medical business. It's a real high-mix environment. They do a lot of sort of customization on a job-by-job basis. They put it in, they have some medical companies that they build complex workstations for. And so they had, sort of handwritten instructions and drawings, and clearly tribal knowledge that was not easy to transfer. So they put us in, used it for their X station. Took them 2 days. The general manager did the instructions. That's the guy in the upper left there. They don't have a dedicated IT staff, which you would expect in a smaller company. So they captured the tribal knowledge. They streamlined and automated what used to be a paper-based QA process, closed their skills gap, and they're getting some help in continuous improvement. I think that's sort of a next thing for them. But a really cool thing they did is they had 4 technicians who worked in one area, and the senior technician up and left with 3 days' notice. And so they had a backlog of orders, so they took another tech who knew how to build workstations but didn't know how to build this workstation and brought him over to the X station, and they said, okay, let's start him on sort of the beginning procedure, way more instructional. So the person ran for a while, and then in sort of a beta of our proficiency recommendation engine, we said, okay, we think we're recommending that this person is now proficient. They switched into the expert path. And he was able to, after a couple bumps, to able to sort of produce proficiently there. And the difference between the learner mode and the expert mode or the proficient mode was about 30%, 37% difference in cycle time. So pretty cool. And our engine is helping them make the decision. In a small company like StrongArm, they probably could have made that decision on their own. But if you have 100 techs and they're, one started today and one's been there for 10 years, it's very difficult to do that. So this is Steve Thorne, general manager, and he just explained the story I just told. Helped them replace the senior tech and get a new person right in operation and productive, so they continue to meet their customer delivery dates, and still maintain their quality. So that's it. Those are the 3 cases, and I got a little bit of time left, so happy to entertain any questions.
Introduce yourself and your company.
I'm Charlie Fink. I wanted to ask you about the inputs. Maybe I missed that. So I understand how you use data and how you organize data for better decision making, but I would like to understand how the data comes into your system.
Okay, yeah, so that's a good question. How does the data come in? So, pretty much it's, if you put the remote expert aside, it's based on the instructions that are authored and the data that's collected in the instructions. So, and there's really 2 types. There's data that you collect externally, like measurement data, sensor data, and then there's the way the worker interacts with the instruction. So, if they go and they decide they need to look at a video, all of that's tracked. If they go backwards in a step, so we track transition times. Those transitions can be based on, I successfully scanned something, it goes to the next step, so we capture that. So we capture, step level granularity, but interstep inside the step. And again, it can be, they could say next, they could say next, they could do an action that would, create it, they could use a foot pedal. So whatever creates the, the events and the thing is what we track. Did I preface it by saying I'm happy to answer any easy questions?
Gary D'Souza with AGCO. I think the last slide you had up there was showing the trend of cycle time that a worker took, right, to complete a task. And you had, I assume it was some sort of AI that's looking at when the worker's proficient enough and then recommending that you go down to another proficient level.
Yeah.
Do you have any other examples of where you use AI in your backend to analyze data?
Yeah, so 3 or 4 places. So the first thing is what data should be considered in the data set. So, humans, they don't log out when they go to the bathroom, right? So you get these outliers. And so we have an outlier algorithm. We have a benchmark algorithm. So the benchmark says, based on, so when you set a step in a process, you say my target time is 4 minutes. The overall time is, say, 1 hour and 20 minutes. We, in the background, are trying to calculate what we think the actual benchmark time is. And that's looking at the distribution of the worker's performance. So you can have like great workers on this one step do poorly, and you go, well, why is that? Well, maybe you could fix the step, We do it in Yeah, so we do it there. We do it in, well, we're not yet doing it, but in the next release, we'll be doing some NLP on sort of the text within the instructions. We have like 6 or 7 places where we do it. And we use different algorithms. I'm not the AI guy, but different algorithms to accomplish different goals. And so we're introducing supervised learning on outliers and benchmarks in the next release. So we're going to start putting the human in the loop to start improving it. And it's cool because some of the stuff we do, we get transfer learning across all of our customers. Some of the things are customer data that we can't get transfer learning on. So, but we do get, a lot of the things about patterns and how people perform and how that relates to the clarity of the instructions. We start seeing patterns that reproduce across customer sets.
Yeah, Russ.